Welcome everybody to CivicTechYYC here. We're here for Conservation Informed by Technology, featuring Anne and Sandy Cross Conservation Area. It's May 10th here at 7 p.m. Our guest tonight is Greg Shyba, CEO of Anne and Sandy Cross Conservation Area. Their main website is crossconservation.org. Twitter, you can find them at ASC Conservation, ASC Conservation, and then Facebook is ASC Conservation there as well. Just a land acknowledgement, CivicTechYYC is an organization that resides on the traditional territories, the peoples of Treaty 7 in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot First Nation tribes of the ASCCA, the Piikani, the Kainai, Stoney Nakoda First Nations tribes, Chiniki, Bearspaw, Wesley, and Tsuut'ina First Nation. And this is also home to the historic Northwest Métis and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. The civic tech movement is a use of technology for public good. We use data to design and address challenges that citizens and governments are facing, help citizens and governments work together to use technology, data and design, pursue opportunities for greater citizen engagement and more effective services, as well as grow public engagement and enhance digital services in ways that are more inclusive, responsive, innovative, open, and citizen-centered. And you can see with the diagram here, civic tech sits in the middle of citizens, society, community challenges, government, public sector, and digital service challenges. Civic tech is a global movement. It's expanded dramatically over the last 15 years with the help of organizations like Code for All. In the US, cities like Chicago, Boston, New York City have led the civic tech movement, with organizations such as Code for America, the US Digital Service, and 18F. And there are civic tech organizations across Canada that are listed by Code for Canada, and also government agencies like the Canadian Digital Service. CivicTechYYC was launched in 2017 by bringing together people who had an interest in improving the community through technology, leveraging the support of the City of Calgary as well as Rainforest Alberta. And the driving force was to break down barriers between sector silos and create a space for collaboration, addressing challenges and opportunities of citizens and government. And you can see Civic Tech sits here within the Calgary or City of Calgary digital strategy, government and tech innovation, citizens and communities, entrepreneurs, startups, and the knowledge ecosystem, as well as the technology industry with smart cities and regional partnerships. Tech for Good is a overall idea, sits in the middle of building technology, platform co-ops, maker spaces, digital rights, open data, digital social innovation, community technology. All of that comes together to create tech that provides social good. And data in the social sector has been increasing rapidly over the last few years. The amount and importance of data is increasing. Organizations are trying to leverage the power of data-informed decision-making, and many lack the resources to collect, understand, and use that data to make better decisions. Data professionals with knowledge and skills want to become more engaged. And here at Civic Tech, we promote volunteer opportunities and facilitate connections to make those tech for good projects happen. I've got a little chart here that just shows how much data has exploded, and have to find an updated one because I feel like after 2020, this has spiked up drastically more now that we're into 2022. Data-informed learning and decision-making is what we work on, and we want to reach that wisdom at the top of the knowledge period, and that requires foundational level data, information, knowledge, and then you finally get to wisdom, which is the comprehensiveness of it all that caps it off. Some of the major projects we've worked on or have on the go, there's the Civic Election Survey app, which is in partnership with other civic techs across the country, which you can reach out to me if you're interested in volunteering for that, as well as the Civic Compass election app. We have blockchain experiments where we test blockchain, not just with cryptocurrencies and sort of different applications. And one of our big successes is Volley, which was started by Alice Lamb, which helps volunteers find local volunteer opportunities. We have our civic user testing groups, which are grassroots groups that facilitate better, more inclusive and accessible usability testing that engage residents in the creation of technology that's meant to serve them. Civic user testing started in Chicago and it spread across many cities, including Toronto's GRIT program, as well as Calgary with our new organization, City Calgary. And you can find more information about Inclusivity Calgary at inclusivitycalgary.ca. We're a team of technologists, designers, public employees, community organizers, entrepreneurs, policy analysts, and other engaged citizens with a shared vision that Calgary can be more accessible for all. Our mission plan is to design, run, testing sessions with inclusive and representative groups of Calgarians to improve usability products, processes, and services for teams in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. We've been proudly supported and funded by the Calgary Foundation, and it's been created in partnership between CivicTechYYC and Calgary UX. If you're wanting to attend the next event, it's going to be Wednesday. I'll be hosting it down there and doing some engagement sessions. And it'll be starting with people filtering in at 4:30 p.m. The official start time will be at 5 p.m. there, and tickets are free. Just come on down in person and you can RSVP at the Eventbrite link there. Our partner organizations and groups, just to go through them, who have helped us out. We have Code for Canada there, Calgary UX, Data for Good, Rainforest Alberta, YYC Data Society, Platform Calgary, and Immigrant Techies Alberta. And then there are our socials, all under CivicTechYYC across Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Website is civictechyc.ca. And there's a meetup link there if you're watching this on the recording there. And with that, I'm going to stop my screen share and I'm going to hand it over to Greg.
Well, thanks very much for the invite today and a chance to talk about the cross conservation area and how we have use for technology and in fact a hunger to use it more effectively. Well, I'm gonna just go through this quickly. I think that it's important to know that have a bit of history about the Cross family. So Sandy Cross was grandson of or a son rather of A.E. Cross, and one of the founders of the Calgary Stampede. His grandfather was James McLeod, the Fort McLeod, the Colonel James McLeod. So they have quite a long family and a lot of connection with Alberta, as well as having the A7 Ranch, which is still one of the largest ranches in southern Alberta, and that's operated by John Cross, one of the Cross family. And you can sort of get a feel for the conservation area. There's a past picture and a present picture. So one of the, I think that's a good picture to show how, in a kind of an oblique way, though, we used to have fires that would come through the foothills. So the last big fire was in 1912. We're heavily forested now in parts of the conservation area, but in 1912, a fire came along and burned everything down. And it may have been set by Indigenous people because they would often set fires to bring the grasslands back for the buffalo. So that was part of their ecological management of the area, the large prairie region. There's the house that Sandy lived in, the Rouge Restaurant is there now. Sandy's dad owned Calgary Brewery, and the St. George's Island, where the zoo is, was donated by the Cross family. You can see the brewery there. That's the first place I ever had too much to drink was many years ago, and when one of my buddies worked in there and it was free beer. I'll never forget that night, that's for sure. But and that, there's still some of the remnant of the building there, and it was sold to a large multinational brewery many years ago. At that time, just prior to that, the family also owned 50 hotels in Alberta, and Bill Aberhart, who was the premier at the time, passed a law that you couldn't, Bill Aberhart, as he was sometimes referred to, passed a law that you could not own a brewery and hotels. And I think that's when they divested themselves of some of those hotels, and most of the hotels, and the brewery itself too. There's still some, there used to be an aquarium there. I think any of the old Calgarians remember going there and visiting the aquarium as well. NC was one of the founders of the Calgary Stampede, A Cross, and one of the founders of the Ranchmen's Club. He donated the land that the Rothney Observatory is on, and this land that is the conservation area now was acquired by Sandy in the 1940s. It was a number of homesteads that he purchased. And then in the late 80s and the 90s, he donated the land to the province of Alberta in 2 tranches, and a foundation was set up. And we have a 99-year lease back, of which there's 70 odd years left. So we're always managing the land with that in mind, what's going to happen at the end of the lease. So we've undertaken quite a few projects where the kids of today will have sweat equity in that land. And for example, this coming weekend, the Calgary Junior Forest Wardens will be planting about 10,000 trees out of the cross conservation area, and those kids and families will perceive that as their forest, and in years to come, they'll be able to drive by or fly over and see the trees that they planted, and certainly will have a role in protecting the area in the future. That's a sort of an overhead shot of the working ranch that we have. That is off 85th Street. So the land's 4,800 acres, 19.5 square kilometers, of which hiking takes place on the northern third of the property. The other 2/3 is not available for public access, although we do have events there. We do have special opportunities for kids to visit those areas. And in fact, we just got permission recently to, there's a reservoir on the property called the Goodwin Reservoir. We're going to be stocking that with fish, and in conjunction with the Children's Hospital, we'll be taking kids that have severe mobility and health challenges out for an opportunity to visit the conservation area and catch a fish. So that's something that we're working on pretty hard to make happen. We were hoping to get it going this year, but COVID and all the other things going on in the world have challenged us on that. Sandy lived in this old cabin since the 1940s. He didn't marry until later in life, and had no children of his own. But Anne had a number of children, all of which own land immediately to the west of the conservation area. He was a great guy. I met him. He passed away quite some years ago, and of course I met Anne, his wife, who passed away in the 90s. There's Anne and Sandy there. So the organization today, we have a board of directors. We're a charity under the Federal Charity Act, and so we have a 99-year lease. We have pretty strict usage requirements out there. No campfires, biking, camping, dogs, and a lot of these are under we're habitat conservation area under the Alberta Wildlife Act, and that stipulates what can and cannot take place on the land for the most part. 400 plant species. We have moose, cougar, bear, elk. We have a resident elk population. We have grizzly bear on the property last year, and all kinds of other mammals and some pretty exotic species of plants that people seek out and try to take photographs of, especially this time of year as they're in early bloom. We have a number of volunteers that help us, about 50 volunteers that are with us on a regular basis. We're also Canada's first nocturnal preserve to protect wildlife values. So as a nocturnal preserve, we've learned a lot about how birds use the night sky to migrate, how predators is more easy for them to predate on mammals when there's more light for them to predate, and even the insect around light bulbs. Or we have very few bulbs on the property, and but if you have a swarm of bugs around lights, that changes the feeding dynamics of the bats and the birds out there. So we're trying to lessen that problem as well. And we have an education program typically where in December of 2019, we were at capacity. We'd been at capacity for 2 years. And then by May of 2020, we dropped down to like no kids, probably from 5,000 to 6,000 kids a year. This year, the way it looks, we might have 1,000 kids. The challenge is busing, getting the kids out there. A lot of great volunteers. Some of them have been with the conservation area since before Sandy even made it a conservation area. So then I'm going to, from there, I guess we can end this and we'll exit that, stop that share. I'm back on the screen then. So technology has really changed what we cannot do out there. So I'm going to use a few examples. I think ones that come to mind now. We've acquired sort of a new advanced wildlife management system using wildlife cameras. So the new wildlife cameras are cellular, they're solar powered, they have GPSs in them. So we can find out where wildlife is in real time. And most of the wildlife in our areas, in the areas where there's no public access, but this type of technology, for example, is being used in K country. So the K country, the managers of K country, they know where the grizzly bears are using these cameras so that they can close trails off remotely and advise people where grizzly bears are to avoid human conflict with bears, which is a very good thing for people, but also it's a very good thing for the bears. So they're not displaced, and if they were to become a problem bear, then we all know that that is not going to result in a good end for that bear, particularly a black bear. Where and GPS has been a tremendous asset to us as well in marking our trails. We have 18 kilometers of hiking trails out there. We want to be able to prepare maps for people. People want to know what elevation gain or loss they're going to have on their hike, the distance of the hike. And we want to be able to map out from the use of technology where we should properly place the trail so that we lessen the impact on the environment, try to keep the angles of the trails safe for people and to avoid erosion as well. Another something that's come to mind, like an issue we have right now, we have an elk trap out at the conservation area. It's 40 acres. It's 1.5 miles of fence. And it was constructed about 20 years ago. And now we're not using the elk trap anymore. And this elk trap was used to solve a problem. And it's a continuing problem out there. We have about 300 elk that typically we have about 30 elk calves born every year at the conservation area, all of which survive because we have never seen a wolf on the conservation area, and that's the primary predator of elk calves. So we have what the biologists say a very high recruitment of elk, and they're overpopulated the area. They tend to stay on the conservation area because there's hunting pressure around. So at one time it was felt the best way to deal with that was to lure them into this trap and then process them and move them to another part of the province where there was a lower elk population. Now with concerns about the spread of diseases like CWD, BSE, that the Alberta government has decided that they do not want to risk spreading these diseases. So the elk, there's increased urban environments increasing its the ability of people to harvest elk in the area. It's a bow and arrow hunting area, but to encourage more landowners to allow people to hunt elk on their property as they move on and off the conservation area. It's pretty evocative to see if you're ever out in that way in the fall. If you've never seen or heard the elk in rut and hear them bugle, it's pretty cool thing to see. One of the other things that we'd really like to use technology for we don't have a good relief map of the area. This is rolling foothills, so similar to the picture and that we're seeing in the back. That would be so great if we could have a map where we could visually see the contours of the land and better understand how the drainage works and so on out there. Now I know we have a map, a huge map. I think it's called an ARC map or something that the county gives us every year or two, and I believe that there might be enough metadata on that map to print a 3D map. I'm not sure what the technology would be to enable us to get something like that, but that would be of tremendous value to us, and we could find the funds to cover the costs of something like that.
Greg, with stuff like that, are you not just looking, because I know we talked about this being a request for the community, so if anyone watching the recording or here has any experience for that with 3D printing or mapping, feel free to chime in. But are you wanting not just a 3D map to show off, but also looking at active climate modeling and using that topographical relief to be able to forecast different areas and climate impacts with the conservation area?
Yes, for sure. And I think that even with the tree planting that we're doing now too, so you want to choose the lodgepole pine, for example, have certain exposures that they thrive best in and elevations as well. And that would enable us to better understand where we should be reforesting the land. Because we're managing, I mentioned fire earlier, we're managing the land in the absence of fire. So we know through research done by academics at the University of Calgary, which parts of the land over the eons have been white spruce or have been willow or aspen, because they do core samples. They drill core samples into the earth and they look at the pollen in the substrate. to determine what historically has been growing in that area. And that's important to us because we're, as I say, we're trying to manage the land in the absence of fire, and we're using tools like cattle to cut the organics down, break down the thatch, and to mimic what buffalo would have done. This was buffalo or bison range historically, pre-contact. So we're trying to make management decisions based upon the data and the research that's available to us. One other thing we'd like to be able to do is on those 18 kilometers worth of hiking trails, to be able to use QR codes and enable people to get more morphological information about the area, to collect that data and put it on our website so people could have a better understanding about the area. In days gone by, people would read a book or do their own research and visually gather information. Now there's an insatiable desire for people to be able to click on something and get a lot of data about the area.
Are you looking to have it be not just them, the way you're explaining it, they scan a QR code and it's kind of like getting the information that you might normally get from like a large plaque or an information piece there, but are you also trying to engage with the people as well? Like, would they be able to scan that and then put information in about what they're seeing or photos for that specific spot related to that QR code?
Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking about is that people would take a picture in a certain spot, and we would collect that data over time through the seasons and over the years, so people could see how things have changed from that vantage point, and collect data like that. And I think there are apps out there now where you can. The Alberta government has an app, a weed app, that if you see a noxious weed, that you can take a picture of it, and the metadata about that weed, the picture and the metadata, so the location, everything goes off to a weed control area in Edmonton, I guess, that can again act upon it if it's a noxious weed that should be sprayed or removed by hand. So government is starting to collect data like that, and we have weed issues out at the conservation area, and it would be good if we could have our own method of, and the way it is now, we have volunteers. We'll give them, if they have an iPhone or a camera that has GPS, and say, well, if you see weeds out there, please take a picture of it and send it to us. But we struggle with putting that metadata on a map. I know that I walked the 1.5 miles of the elk fence we're going to take down, and I took pictures with my iPhone in various spots on it, just so that I could see the footprint of the whole elk trap on the land. And then when I look at it, your iPhone has a sort of a placeholder where you can see where all the photos are, but it's not a very good way to collect that data. Like, I'm sure I just don't know how to mine it properly to collect all the data off it, so that I could even see the trail that I walked, or I could outline the area of the elk trap itself.
Well, I know iPhones with theirs, if you're just doing photos, it's kind of a rough coordinate and it's not as precise as some other GPS technologies out there, because usually for navigation, but sometimes you need to have, at least from my experience, a dedicated camera with a high-end GPS chip, or track the movement of people going through the trail as they're going through, because as you're having the GPS do more check-ins, it'll usually map it a little bit more precisely.
Yeah, and we need that information now, because we are going to do an RFP to ask, to submit an RFP for seek proposals from from contractors in the area to remove the elk fence. So I wanted to know exactly how big it is to be able to show them how, you know, what the elk trap looks like, what the situation is in a virtual way, instead of them trekking around there and maybe not getting the right data for us to be able to give them the information they need to make an accurate response to our request for proposals. So that's another example of where better data recovery or mining would be advantageous to us.
You just mentioned the elk trap. How is that affecting conservation on there? Because you said originally it was designed to trap them to plan to move them elsewhere, and they're now not being moved elsewhere. So does having that on the land affect your conservation efforts and how you're planning right now? And what sort of change would it make if that was then removed?
Well, it's taken about 45 acres of land out of use by other mammals. Large herbivores, basically, because the fence is still up and they technically can't get in it. It's blocked off, but the fence is down in a couple of spots, so we're seeing some wildlife that's going into that area, and it impairs their movement on the land. We're kind of unique in that we don't, because we don't allow access to 2/3 of the land, we're not displacing wildlife. We're different than K Country or Banff National Park, even, where people pretty well have an unfettered opportunity to visit the entire land base. And in doing so, wildlife is displaced because of that, of human activity. So we have 2/3 of land where people seldom go, and that's why we have a population of bears and cougars, and we're trying to preserve that over time, and for them to travel back and forth on the land in an actual way. The fence is, it's 10-foot high page wire fence, so nothing can get by it or over it.
Yeah, that's quite significant in height compared to a number of ones, probably mainly to prevent the elk from jumping over it, right? Whereas if you had it much lower, they'd just be able to jump the fence.
Well, and that's I'll sort of comment on that too. So we have 22 miles of fence. All of the fence that we've put up in the last 10 years is wildlife friendly fence, and it allows wildlife to travel on and off the conservation area in relative safety. The fences are designed so that elk and deer and moose don't get entangled when they jump over. Their back legs don't get entangled in the fence, and for their calves or fawns can travel underneath the fence. The lowest wire is 22 inches off the ground. So that, you know, over time, it will be interesting to see what happens to the area. The city limits is a mile away now. And this area has the potential to be the largest urban park in North America as the city moves in around it. And, you know, we struggle with what's going to happen to that wildlife 50 or 80 or 100 years from now, when it's surrounded by the city of Calgary. And we're seeing it now. We're seeing more and more subdivisions come in, or housing developments on our border, literally.
Yeah, because right now, Nose Hill, I believe, is one of the largest inner city parks in North America. So you're saying with the size of yours, if the communities eventually surround it, this will be literally the largest park in North America inside of a city space?
Yeah.
Huh, that's impressive.
Yeah, we're about twice the size of Fish Creek Park, and we're at 19.5 square kilometers. So I'm pretty sure we're quite a bit bigger than Fish Creek Park. Well, by 2 times, and Nose Hill as well.
Is there anything that you're planning with logistics with that happening, or are you working with community developers that are planning communities in and around the area to try and mitigate issues, or is there anything that you foresee that could be coming up with that?
Well, we did commission a study, academics with the Mestakis Institute and the University of Calgary, and it's called it's a wildlife study, a very in-depth study on wildlife corridors in the area. So with this study, which has been provided to local and municipal governments, and we always provide a copy of it to any developers. The developers and their consultants all know about it. So we ask that whenever housing development is built in the area, that the wildlife corridors are preserved. So, for example, Pine Creek originates on the conservation area, and it flows into the Bow River near the Pine Creek wastewater treatment plant. So we've maintained and requested that in the future that riparian area always be made available for wildlife movement, so that wildlife can move up and down that corridor from there to the Bow River, and then also the corridor to the west, so that wildlife can travel west and into K country from the conservation area, the elk herd in particular, because it's big and tends to from time to time make they all get together. There'll be a herd of thousands of them, and you'll see them at Bragg Creek or even in Cochrane or further points west. And when they are on the move, they take down all the fences. They don't jump over them. They just sort of move right through them. And one of the other data mining or data of importance to us is our visitor numbers. So we have a electronic counter manufactured in Canmore, a company that has a lot of expertise in North America, and it's for they're used a lot in K country as well. And it's a little electronic battery, runs off 2 AA cells, and it was an infrared counter that we put up on our trails, and it counts the people going by, and depending how you place it, it'll divide that number by 2 if people have to go and come on the same trail. And it gives us precise data, the numbers, of course, what time of the day they come, so we can see what our peak days are, get an idea of what our count is on weekends as well, so that we can manage people. Because we don't want days out there when we have too many people on the land. That's another one of our management strategies. I have a yellow lab, and she's kind of, I don't know if you can hear her in the background, she's wanting to get my wife to maybe, then my wife just heard her. So
she knows she's you're talking about her.
No, well, and it's interesting. Pets like our dog with COVID, like she just wonders like, what's going on? Who are you talking to? And let me. I want to play. But I sort of just let me look at my list here to see. So I'm mentioning the tracking people. I think that's going to be a huge issue for us in the future with COVID. We had a huge increase in the number of visitors, and visitors with families, and we'd like to better understand when they're coming, what their count is. But that's the software that comes with that little reader, which they charge about $1,000 for it. So it's the size of a half a pack of cigarettes, I guess you'd say. And I guess nowadays we should say it's half the size of an iPhone or something. But it's a wonderful tool for us to manage what decisions as far as letting big groups come in. We ask that larger groups book book in advance. I think I've covered off, mapping is a big thing for us. We're so delighted that we have the GPS now that we can track wildlife in particular, and know where they are, where they're resident, and have a better understanding of the numbers of wildlife we have as well.
I think you had mentioned just when we were talking before the meeting today about there was some use of drones that you were using for wildlife, because it was at the drone testing areas nearby.
Yeah, so we have made it. There's a drone school, and I forget the name of it. And we made the space available for them, a particular spot where we knew that they weren't interfering with wildlife. So they used it for part of their drone training. And one of the arrangement we made, we weren't charging them for it. We said, well, if you would take some photographs of, they have the technology to better map the land surface with the drone imagery. So they helped us in doing some of the trail mapping that we did. And we have a couple of drones, and we use them primarily for fencing right now, to better understand where our fences are, and be able to view those from up high, and know that they're in good condition and are doing the job keeping animals out or in the wildlife conservation area as required. They're great tools for sure, but we don't use them in a sophisticated manner, not like some. And we don't, I think the licensing of drones has changed quite a bit. I did get a drone license, and at one time we had people flying them all over the place out there. So we had to put a stop to that, because we'd have little kids out there playing, and we'd have drones flying around them, and maybe not under control either, and without not even knowing where the pilot was. They were out of their line of sight. So I think the government passed some legislation to make that less of an opportunity for people.
I remember I was working retail at the time and selling the drones, and we ended up having to kind of preface to people, no, if you want to fly this, you have to get a license and ensure it's certified and register it with the government.
Yeah.
And it's nice that they've put that in place. Originally, it was because of partly because of privacy within cities, because of how you could get the drones and fly them almost anywhere, but also because of the wildlife side of things, because if you are flying that out, there's noise pollution and the possibility of that crashing and hurting something, depending on who the pilot is and what the hardware is.
Well, people are using them to poach. So I think that's and I think the Wildlife Act was changed to stop people from using drones for hunting purposes. So even out of the conservation area, we're pretty certain that people would put up drones, and they would drive the elk herd across the land. Like, you would fly them at a low altitude to scare the elk, and they would drive them into hunters, so that hunters could I wouldn't call that harvesting, I'd call that poaching, would poach the animals. So I think that's been outlawed now as well. That's a case where technology wasn't very, it caused a problem. And I know when I was at Yellowstone, I guess about 4 years ago, and going to see some of the like Old Faithful, and there were drones, crashed in the bogs there. So they came down pretty heavy on the drone operator, because once they fell in there, you couldn't retrieve them. It would be very difficult to retrieve them. You needed to use another drone to retrieve them.
I didn't hear about that with Yellowstone. I haven't visited there since before drones became popular, but yeah, especially with what the sites are like there, I can see that happening.
Yeah, they had big signs up there then, but we did see a drone that was crashed in a sensitive area.
I'm just opening it up for questions. I put in chat asking if anyone wants to ask questions there, and I got Jeff with his hand up there with a question.
Sure, Jeff.
Thanks, Greg, so much for the presentation. Really interesting history and kind of just a gem, that is out there. I'm curious about what kind of opportunities are there, for conservation areas to kind of get together across Alberta or even, across Canada to share information, maybe share data, share new techniques, with other conservation areas or parks or that sort of thing. Does that happen?
Yeah, well, it does actually, and it's interest. We're members of the Association of Nature Centers, and that's a North American organization. I think there's about 300 members of nature centers. We're also right now we're not members. There's the Land Trust Association of North America, which has thousands of members, but they charge like $1,000 a year US to belong. And we join it every 2 or 3 years and go to their annual meeting. But it's a lot of money because it is Americentric to like everything they do is about the US. Like we're just sort of tag alongs on that, but there are large organizations and ANCA, the Association of Nature Centers, be pleased to share information about them. And I was actually looking at their website today, looking at some of the information that and I've gone to 4 of their annual meetings. And the last one I went to was in Alabama, believe it or not. And it was a large nature center, much larger than ours. And it could sleep up to 2,000 kids a night. And all the food prepared there was raised on that conservation area. They have pigs, beef, chickens, goats, but they don't kill anything on it's all processed off the land, for I think just the sensitivity of that part of it. But when you go to eat there, all the everything that's on the plate came from the land. And you were actually exploring what we have on the back burner, the desire to build a much larger center that would provide for 50 kids to sleep over at night. And one of the parts of that will be that we'll have a growing area where we can grow some crops, both inside and outside, so the kids can have a better understanding of where their food comes from.
Great. Yeah, just sort of around the data that you're collecting, and just kind of put an offer out there. I mean, one of our kind of sister meetup groups is called Data for Good. So we're a group of data analysts and data scientists that help organizations, nonprofit social organizations, get the most out of their data. So if someday you are interested in, taking a look at maybe your historical data and various other aspects of it, whether it's wildlife or the visitors or the volunteers or whatever, we could potentially help you, put that data kind of in real time into sort of a dashboard, right, where you could be monitoring and tracking all of that information as well. So
well, and that's a good point. And this is a little bit off of the cross conservation area, but I've been a very active volunteer with the Calgary Foundation over the years, and I'm pretty experienced in this sector. And the one thing that the not-for-profit sector generally in Calgary and Alberta is not good at is managing its data, and that's even its membership data. In the United States, there are large companies that manage data for the not-for-profit sector. In a prior life, I was the CEO of Trout Unlimited Canada for 10 years. And when I would go down to the States and meet with my counterpart down there, they had a large corporation manage their million-person database for free. But down in the States, they still do a lot of membership swapping of lists, and that's our privacy legislation in Canada doesn't enable companies to do that very easily. But certainly there are so many small not-for-profits in Calgary that do a very poor job in managing their data. Even as far as renewing memberships and that type of thing. So I just throw that out there. That's one thing that I've talked to the Calgary Foundation, and I just recently retired from the board of the Calgary Chamber of Volunteer Organizations, CCVO.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've raised with them on a number of occasions too. I think that that's still a huge issue, and and certainly in the conservation sector, we're kind of unique, the cross conservation area, because we don't have members. When it was set up by Ann and Sandy back in the 80s and 90s, conservation easements weren't a tool that could be used. So if they were to do what they're doing now, it would have been they would have kept the land and put a conservation easement on it that would have restricted what could have happened to it in perpetuity. But the only tool that was available to them was an out-and-out gift to the Crown, and then they would get a tax receipt and then a lease back. But there are so many other conservation areas where memberships are like a challenge, and and I'd be pleased to there's a provincial organization, a pretty loose one, and there's a national organization as well that meets from time to time, and that might be a great opportunity for that group to I would help sort of assemble a better understanding of what the needs might be, so that it could be brought to those groups as to what they could do better as far as managing their data. It's volunteers that are running a lot of these organizations. They can't afford software. They're lucky if they've got a computer that's got an operating system on it that isn't outdated. I forget how many. Is there something like 20,000 not-for-profits in Alberta? It's huge.
Yeah, I mean, Data for Good. We get more involved in the the analysis and kind of visualization of the data that exists. So we can kind of make recommendations or provide advice around the collection, but we don't get involved where service IT service companies would actually do that. But that being said, around analyzing and visualizing the data, Data for Good is a national. We have chapters all the way across Canada. So if there is a national organization and there's data from across Canada, then there might be some really interesting opportunities to do a across Canada kind of datathon where we would help you guys to analyze and visualize and get the most out of the data that you've actually collected.
Yeah, and I was looking at it from that perspective. I know that that wouldn't be something you guys would be doing the data collection, but I think there's a lot of organizations that don't understand that there's value to that. that they can do things with the data they've got, or if they manage it better and more effectively. They're, you know, I've been a volunteer on both sides, and you know, there are just as many people and organizations in Calgary whose job it is to give away money as there are people asking for it. And there are a lot of those organizations that are giving out money. They want to give it effectively. They want to make sure that the money's wisely spent, that they get reports back on those expenditures. And I think that any presentation or collection of information that'll assist both sides is of huge value, huge value. Even the Calgary Foundation, like the big foundations like Max Bell Foundation, they're out looking to make to support the community, and they rely upon the data collection that they do to make decisions or to identify prospective recipients of their funding. Any other questions? Or, and I'll let me maybe we should have a phone call or further discussion with that, Jeff.
Absolutely, happy to do that. Ross is part of both groups as well, so we can certainly have that discussion. It'd be great.
And I could bring somebody in from CCBO or the Calgary Foundation to talk about it as well.
Yeah, we have quite good connections there established already. We actually did a datathon with the Calgary Foundation a few years ago. It was quite interesting. Yeah, so
yeah. Good.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions in chat there. I guess less chance for any before I close up the recording for the evening, and then we just go into the casual chat time. Yeah, not seeing anything. Thanks for heading over tonight, everybody who was able to make it in, and thank you to those who were able to catch it on the recording. Make sure to go and check out the conservation area and see if you can plan a trip out there, because I know Greg likes to be able to show it off in person as well. And hope everybody has a good evening or whatever time of day it is when you're catching the recording here.